to say that the Eagles offense was shut down is just, it's not true. It's not close. You can look at the numbers. I mean, the Eagles did not pile up 450 yards of offense, but when they needed scoring drives, they scored on 4 possessions in the first half.
There's my man, John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation. I know John's probably on the roller coaster of emotions after that Phillies game yesterday. You know what, John? I did not feel good about that game at all.
Yeah, I mean, game twos have not been their friend over the course of postseasons past. You know, they win that game 1, they get off to a good start, and then they usually struggle in game 2. And so, yeah, it was. You had to feel good with Aaron Nola. I felt good with Aaron Nola on the mound, but he did not have it. He had one of those games in game 2. So, you know, what are you going to do? You leave San Diego tied 1-1, and it's going to be nuts at the bank this weekend. So it'll be. I feel like they're going to be okay.
Yeah, I'll be there Friday. So my voice is probably going to be out from being at the Sixers home opener tonight and then being at the Phillies game tomorrow. This is the beauty of bye week. I actually get to use my season tickets.
Yeah, October's the time, and you could probably hear my voice is a little worse for wear this morning. So I'm going to try and hold it together here with you while we're talking.
So one of the topics I brought up with Tone, I'm sure you heard when you were backstage, this whole Bucky Brooks comment that the Cowboys defense shut down the Eagles offense on Sunday night. I didn't feel that way personally. I know the stats might say that, but the Eagles still scored 26 points off that.
Yeah, they scored 26 points. You can't say that you shut down another team's offense if they scored 26 points. You can't say you shut down another team's offense if they were up 20-0 right before half. You could say that they did some things to slow them down in the second half to allow the Cowboys to get back into the game. You can say that the Cowboys defense took advantage of Lane Johnson being out, and they took advantage of maybe Jordan Mailata not at 100%, of Jason Kelce not at 100%. You could say those things. Those things would be intellectually honest. But to say that the Eagles offense was shut down is just, it's not true. It's not close. You can look at the numbers. I mean, the Eagles did not pile up 450 yards of offense, but when they needed scoring drives, they scored on 4 possessions in the first half. And then when they absolutely needed to score, the Cowboys defense could not stop them. They could not stop them from going on a long scoring drive as the Cowboys pulled to within 3. And the Eagles go down and I forget how long that drive was. It's 7 minutes, 8 minute drive where, you know, they're just running the ball down their throats the entire time. And then they get those 2 passes at the end of the drive to score the touchdown. That's not shutting down an offense. You may have slowed them down a tiny bit for a period, but that's it.
I'm a big Micah Parsons fan. I've gone along with Micah Parsons for a lot of years. Penn State guy. Micah's a good guy, and social media, it can be his best friend and his worst enemy. And I thought this week it didn't help him. And I know Dan Sileo, who hosts the National Football Show, decided to trigger him a little bit. He kind of added him in something about his dominance, and Parsons did not take the high road. And I go into the gist of the tweets, but it feels like Micah Parsons didn't actually think he was neutralized on Sunday, which he was. And I don't know. I think that's part of the maturity level he needs to. Not saying he's not mature, but I feel like that's just something where okay, you kind of let sports commentators, radio show hosts, all that. You just kind of let them do their thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more of these things you do, the more time you have as a professional athlete. Some of these guys, they come in and they just know how to do it, right? Like Jalen Hurts knows how to do it. He doesn't. If somebody were to say something like that to him, it would roll off his back. I think it's the same with Dak most of the time. Dak has put his foot in his mouth in recent seasons at the end of the year, but with Micah, I think he was neutralized for most of that game. He did come on in the third quarter again when Jack Driscoll was in there. And I know there is more to the story than just, Jack Driscoll against Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons wins. You know what I mean? Like, they bring more pressure from the other side. It forces the offensive line to have to shift their coverage, to shift their blocking schemes and all this kind of stuff. It's not really just a 1-versus-1 matchup anymore. But they forced Micah Parsons to have to make choices. They decided, you know what, let's not waste our time trying to block this guy. Let's put him in conflict. Let's have him make a decision. Are you going to pursue the running back on this RPO? Or are you going to pursue Jalen Hurts? Or are you going to, cover the tight end leaking out to the flat? Those were your options. And, you've got a 1-in-3 shot of getting it right. And there were a few times he got it right. And there were many, many times where he didn't get it right. And so that was the Eagles' way of neutralizing him. And I was pretty darn effective.
What do you make of this Cowboys team through 6 games? I still think they're really good, but they're really hard to get a read on because the NFL is just completely mediocre.
Well, they haven't had their quarterback. I mean, you got to see how they are with their quarterback. I know they didn't play well in week 1 when Dak was in there, but a lot of teams didn't play well in week 1. You can't use the first week of the NFL season to determine whether or not you're going to be any good that year. It's a weird week. Nobody plays preseason games anymore. Nobody has real training camps anymore. And so that first week, a lot of times, is really what you would have seen in the first preseason game as far as guys with tackling and guys being crisp offensively, running plays smoothly. So I think with Dak Prescott in there, I think there's a chance they win that game on Sunday night if it's not Cooper Rush. I don't think Dak throws 3 interceptions in that game. Maybe he does. I don't know. But I think you have to look at the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott under center as a really good team and maybe the second best team in the conference right now because of that defense. That defense is very good. It's just the Eagles found a way to score enough points, 26 points off them, to have a relatively comfortable victory. It got tight there in the fourth quarter. Everybody clenched up a little bit, but eventually the Eagles kind of imposed their will on that defense. And as an Eagles fan, you have to feel good because I think you clearly saw that you can score on this Dallas defense. It's not so good that you can't do anything against them, but that is a better team with Dak in there. And when Dak is back, and it sounds like it's going to be this week, or it could be this week, we'll see how that offense functions. I know people thought Cooper Rush did a decent job. He did exactly what a backup quarterback is supposed to do. He won 4 out of 5 games when the starter was out. That's all you can ask of him. But he's not a starting quarterback. He's not a guy who's going to make plays through the air, and that's what Dak can do.
Yeah, they were 27th in the league in passing for a reason. I actually mentioned that my strengths and weaknesses column for CBS Sports. That is their weakness. And again, Dak Prescott is out. I wanted to bring this up to you too. This kind of upset me personally as a guy who admires the heck out of Jason Peters. I love what Jason Peters did for the Philadelphia Eagles for a lot of years, and he is 40 years old now. He's not the same player. But I just happened to catch a lot of Dallas writers writing this. This isn't the Jason Peters we thought we were getting. Because Jason Peters doesn't really play. He's kind of a backup, to put it nicely. And what did Dallas think they were getting with this guy? Like, this guy wasn't going to come in and start for them. Like, they're just lucky he's a 40-year-old that could still play at a high level.
Yeah, if Dallas thought that they were getting a starting left tackle when they signed Jason Peters, they haven't been paying attention to the last couple of seasons. He's been in decline, which is understandable given the fact he's 40 years old, for crying out loud. So no, he's played pretty well in his in the snaps that he had been getting at left guard. I think, you're right, like a rotational backup guy you don't want playing any more than 15 or 20 snaps a game. He's a guy, if you need him at left guard for a couple of weeks, you hope that he can get the job done. And he largely did that with Dallas, up until this game where he didn't play very much. I know he was dealing with an injury. And that's the other thing with Jason Peters is you're going to get injuries with him because he's 40. So yeah, I don't, if there was any Cowboys fan or any Dallas media member who was looking at Jason Peters as the quote unquote answer to something, then they were going to be let down. They were going to talk themselves into something that they could not speak into existence.
Yeah, his tenure with the Cowboys is starting to feel like Harold Carmichael's. You kind of forget it.
Yeah, Terrell Owens, same way.
Well, T.O. at least was productive with him. But
yeah,
right.
I had a couple seasons. You're right. You're right.
Same story there. Did you hear? Well, you probably did because you're down in that area. You heard about the Commanders 50-50 thing, right?
No, I don't think I did.
Oh, okay. So you know how teams do 50-50s like at the stadium, like the 50-50 raffles?
Yeah.
Those games. So the Commanders had one for week 1. The winner had his check bounced.
Oh my gosh.
Can you
I have
find
not heard that.
it's amazing, right? Right, John? Like every time you think this organization might be figuring things out, they find some way to embarrass themselves even more.
I want to warn Eagles fans that it sounds like maybe for the first time there are some cracks in the armor among the owners that Daniel Snyder may not be safe. I think it certainly sounds like that there. Jim Irsay said something this week about it, where that there might be reason there's cause to at least talk about removing Daniel Snyder. I mean, it wasn't like, he's gone, we're getting rid of him, we're working on this, but I don't think he's long as the owner of that organization. Especially when you hear that he's trying to get dirt on other owners to hold them hostage or to to blackmail them into continuing to vote to keep him on as the owner of the Commanders. Once Daniel Snyder is out of there and they get an owner who isn't one of the worst people in the world. I think, you might see a turnaround in Washington because, it's got the fan base in Washington is a good fan base. It's a fan base that's just waiting for something. They're just, I'm in Northern Virginia. They're waiting for this team for something they can root for. And it's, they once again this year, they hitched their wagons to Carson Wentz. That's going south. It looks like another lost season in Washington. And fans here are just frustrated. They're fed up, and it's so quick to turn negative because they really haven't known anything else for 25 years. It's disheartening if you're a Commanders fan to know going into every season you are not likely to be among the top teams in the NFL, and it all comes back to the owner.
It's really upsetting too because growing up, they were like the proud franchise. Like
Oh yeah,
you go in the
marquee.
RFK Stadium, you were intimidated. It was
Yeah.
RFK. Even the early years of FedEx Field, you were intimidated because they were at least a decent football team. Now it's yeah, I don't like to get on Eagles fans too much, but I will get on this. We take over FedEx Field, dude. Everybody takes over FedEx Field. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
don't go there. No one cares about that franchise.
No, and it's really hard to get there. So fans, you got to really believe in the team if you're going to make that trek out to FedEx Field out in Landover, because it is difficult to get in and out of there. It is a time consuming. It's your whole day. It's like you're flying. You're basically like 3 hours at the airport. That's kind of what it's like to go to RFK. 3 hours in, 3 hours out, and then 3 hours at the game. So, it is a proud franchise. This was, the Gary Clark, Art Monk, Ricky Sanders days. Those Randall Cunningham days where he went into RFK and they were down like 20-0 in the first quarter, and he came back in that 42-37 game. That game is indelibly linked in my head as maybe my all-time favorite game from when I was a kid. And they played so many amazing games in those late 80s, early 90s. Those Washington teams, they went to so many Super Bowls with Joe Gibbs as the head coach. They were one of the marquee franchises in the NFL. Like, if you would ask people, give me your top 5 teams in the NFL for about a 15-20 year stretch, Washington would have been among the 5. You probably have the Raiders, you certainly have the Cowboys, and Washington would have been there, with all those different teams. And so it is a shame. It's sad, and the NFC East is better. It's a more fun division when Washington has a good football team.
Yeah. So this is to me how dangerous RFK was. I started really getting into watching football, remembering football around 95, 96. And the 96 season opener, Randall Cunningham, Rodney Peete and the Eagles go in. They're coming off playoff appearance. Washington's pretty good football team. They got Terry Allen. They got guys like that. And the Eagles go in there and they just blitzkrieg them in the first half. And you got Summerall and Madden, hyping up the scene. Okay, like this Washington team's going to compete for the division title. This Eagles team, we think they're good, but we're not sure. And yeah, Washington made a second impact, but you could see the atmosphere the entire game. It was like basically like how the Phillies game was last Friday night at Citizens Bank Park. It was just constantly loud. I don't hear that anymore out of Washington. And yeah, when you think of the Commanders, you're thinking of, oh, that's the team that put the W logo on Washington State mugs because they're just that inept of a franchise.
They had a moment when RG3 in his rookie season was playing really well and got them to the playoffs. That stadium was pretty well rocking when he was there. And it's unfortunate, and this, when you have a bad franchise, some of it is bad luck. And RG3's injury torpedoed what could have been a very good career, a very long career, and a 10-year stretch where they were very good, and it just didn't work out. But that was the last time I remember FedEx Field, Washington fans being on fire for this team, because even when they won the division a couple of seasons ago, it was with a losing record, and Taylor Heineke's your quarterback, and he's not the future. So, they even had they are this fan base is long overdue for something good to happen. And Daniel Snyder getting kicked out would be the best case scenario for everybody, because then you can move on and you can start to build something. You just can't build anything with Daniel Snyder around.
No, you can't. And so I guess my next question would be here. Yeah, now I got Daniel Snyder on the brain. Is it Carson Wentz or is it the offensive line? I guess we're going to find out over the next 6 games.
And I think the answer can be that it's both. I think if you're looking to blame one thing more than the other, it's probably the offensive line, simply because if you give Carson time, he can beat you. But he hasn't had any time. And if you get Carson off his spot, if you make him move, if you give him less than the requisite time that he needs to try and play hero ball, he's going to implode. And I think he doesn't have the playmakers around him either. We came into the season thinking, oh, they've got some more playmakers. They get Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel's coming back. He looks like he's gonna be healthy. Antonio Gibson looks like a good player. They've got all these different guys, but it just hasn't worked. They frankly, they need a new head coach. They need a new everything. I like Ron Rivera, but he's old. He's just old school. You look at that offense, there is nothing inventive about it. There's nothing new. There's nothing that makes you say, oh yeah, Washington's really got their finger on the pulse of something here. It's so vanilla. It's so bland. And with Carson back there trying to play hero ball, his physical skills have diminished. He's not the physical, the player that he once was. And it's all falling apart. And so I think the offensive line is certainly the bigger issue in Washington than the quarterback, but they're going to have a new quarterback for the next 4 to 6 weeks anyway. So I guess you're right. We'll find out.
This is what's interesting to me. Let's go to the crystal ball. Thanksgiving. Carson Wentz a starting quarterback?
No, I don't think so. I think Taylor Heineke will, because he can make some more plays with his legs. I think the offense will cosmetically look more alive. I think it'll look more energetic. I think when you come down to it, I think you'll see fewer turnovers from Taylor Heineke, actually. I don't think you're going to see some of the Carson Wentz interceptions that we see. So I think it's going to feel like the offense is better, running more efficiently. As far as points go, I don't know that it's going to be a whole lot more efficient. But it certainly doesn't sound like there's any love from Ron Rivera to Carson Wentz. And reading reports this week that it was actually Daniel Snyder who wanted Carson Wentz and not the coaching staff leads me to think that Carson Wentz's time as the starting quarterback in Washington is pretty much over. And that would essentially mean that his time as a starting quarterback in this league is over. I think we have to look at Carson Wentz moving forward as he's now going to be a career backup quarterback. And he has to get his mind right with that, because I can't imagine another team taking him on and saying, yes, he's our starter. So Carson Wentz, after he gets back from this injury, I don't think he's going to be the starter. I think Taylor Heineke will hold on to the job. And if he doesn't, and Carson does come back, this is his last season as a starting quarterback. Nobody's going to let him do this again.
I thought it was interesting how Colts fans are comparing the Matt Ryan experience to the Carson Wentz experience. But if you take away, and again, guy's on pace for a record number of fumbles here, and he doesn't as many picks as Carson did last year. But I thought Carson played with a much better offensive line than what Matt Ryan's playing with in Indianapolis. It seems like Frank Reich finally made changes to make the offensive line better, but I don't think Matt Ryan is playing as bad in Indianapolis as many are thinking he does. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I'm going to say something that may be kind of off the beaten path here a little bit. I don't think I've heard this from many people. Frank Reich might not be a very good head coach.
I'm thinking that too. I am on the hot seat.
Yeah, show me where he's done well as a head coach. Show it to me. I'm here for it. I think he looked good. The team looked good until the last couple of weeks last year, and everybody just dumped it all on Carson's shoulders. And no doubt about it, Carson played terrible football. But and I see he's playing the same brand of football in Washington. So Carson Wentz certainly was a lot to blame. But what has Frank Reich? How has he gotten the most out of his team as a head coach? I think he's a great offensive coordinator, and like you said, maybe he doesn't have the pieces in place, but he's the head coach. He gets the pieces. He can go to the GM and say, here's what we need, here's what we want, here's because Jim Irsay wants to win. Jim Irsay, I don't think is going to be a guy who's going to say, well, we can't really avoid this guy. I think he's going to get the guys that Frank Reich wants to get. But when you're looking at what's going on with Matt Ryan and with Carson Wentz last year and the collapse and the slow start that Indianapolis is getting off to in a very winnable division, I don't see what Frank Reich has done that really makes him a great head coach.
There's two things that are consistent with the Indianapolis Colts: slow starts and different quarterbacks. It's like when you host a radio show. How can you get high ratings on a radio show if you're switching the host every single year?
Very true. Very true. You need some consistency, and I think that's one of the things Ron Rivera has talked about with the Commanders when asked why he can't successfully rebuild this team. They have not been able to land themselves a franchise quarterback. They've tried. They thought Dwayne Haskins was going to be that guy. They thought RG3 was going to be that guy. They thought Kirk Cousins was going to be that guy. And you can look back at, moving on from Kirk Cousins as a fatal flaw, as a fatal blow for this team's prospects over the last few years, because I'm not the biggest Kirk Cousins fan in the world, but you look in Minnesota, that is a functional offense. They've got a good offense. He can throw the football. He is certainly light years better than anything they have right now, and he's a guy they drafted. He was a Washington draft pick. He played a bunch after RG3 left. I mean, he was here for a few years and was very, very good. So they've made some mistakes at the quarterback position, and if your owner is bad, your GM is bad, which it was for a long time under Bruce Allen, and your quarterback is bad, you are not winning in the NFL. And that's been Washington's horrible trifecta.
The Giants seem to figure out we don't know if they got quarterback yet, but they definitely got the GM in Joe Shen, and they got the head coach. They definitely got the head coach in Brian Daboll. It's amazing what happens when you get those two things right. Because this team, they're not a 5-1 football team, but they got Wink Martindale. They got Mike Kafka. They got Brian Daboll. They got Joe Shen. The Giants are on the uptick.
They are. And I said this at the beginning of the season that you bring in the Buffalo Brain Trust, guys who were an integral part in revitalizing Josh Allen's career, getting that franchise up and running as a powerhouse in the NFL. That made me nervous because you figure these guys have a recipe. They kind of know what they're doing. And I think it was important that both the GM and head coach came over together, right? I mean, you have these guys who are in lockstep from day one. You don't have a GM who's coming in with a coach who he's got under contract for another 2 years. And you don't have a head coach coming in with a GM who's been there for 4 or 5 years with two different head coaches before him. So you have these two guys coming in at the same time. They're hitting the ground running at the same time. They can both align their plans together, and it's been seamless. They've gotten Daniel Jones to stop turning the ball over. They put Saquon Barkley in a time machine and brought back, 2018 Saquon Barkley. I mean, he's looking phenomenal, and the defense is playing pretty good football. Now, the Giants are not a juggernaut. Their offense has not been hugely productive outside of Saquon Barkley. Daniel Jones is not throwing the ball a ton. They lack some skill positions talent there, but that is a gritty team. It's a grinding team, and they're playing pretty well. They're going to be a tough opponent for the Eagles here down the stretch, especially, I think that last game of the season probably won't mean anything for either team. So you'll probably only get one game that really matters against the Giants here. It's in New York in a few weeks, but I'm a little nervous about the Giants. I don't think they're ahead of Dallas right now, but that's a good football team.
What is your short-term outlook for them? Meaning they're 5-1 now. How many wins do you think this team can end up getting?
I don't have their schedule in front of me, but I feel like everybody in the NFC East has a weaker schedule. I think that the Eagles will beat them in a few weeks, but that's kind of a toss-up game to me because it's tough to go into New York and win. I think they'll probably take a Cowboys game. I think they'll probably sweep the Commanders. And then after that, their schedule is pretty light. They've beaten the teams on their schedule they need to beat. So I think this could be a 10-win team. I mean, this is certainly a team that can go 10-7 without a doubt. I think they're a playoff team in this NFC, this very weak NFC, where you've got the Buccaneers with Tom Brady dealing with marriage issues that are clearly affecting him on the field. Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, who's already turning on his head coach because he doesn't have anybody to throw the ball to. The 49ers, who have big question marks at quarterback and just lost. Who did they lose to the last week? It was the
Falcons.
The Falcons, yeah. I mean, you've got these teams, and let's look at the Rams. The Rams won last week, but that offensive line can't block anybody. So this whole conference is wide open. It's a perfect opportunity for an up-and-coming team like the Giants, who are disciplined, who are well-coached, to come in and grab a wild card spot for sure.
Okay, so this is the Giants' schedule. So they got Jacksonville this week. Tough game, but
tough game.
Yeah. Then they go to Seattle. Tough game.
Yeah.
Bye week. Then ready for this: Houston, Detroit at home, Dallas Thanksgiving, Washington, Philly, Washington, Minnesota, Indianapolis, Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think there's a total of 10 wins in there. I mean, they're already 5-1, right? They need 5 more wins the rest of the way to get to 10, and there are easily 5 wins in there, I think, for the New York Giants. So I think 10 wins is where they're going to land.
Yeah, and I honestly
and even that would be a little disappointing, right? That means they're going 5-7 in their last 12. So, that's kind of, I mean, you could even say 11 wins if you think they go 500 over that stretch.
It's crazy too. They played one game against the NFC East and they lost it. Now, granted, they played the Cowboys, but they're 5-0 outside the division. I think it's one of the reasons why the division is as good as it is this year. I harp on the AFC South and the NFC North. If you want to call me an NFC North hater, go ahead. I think that division sucks.
Yeah, I picked the Vikings at the beginning of the year just because I didn't see. We've seen Green Bay. When Aaron Rodgers doesn't have enough talent around him, we've seen him turn on everyone and have terrible seasons. We've seen this from Aaron Rodgers before. And losing Devontae Adams just seemed like it was going to be a crusher right from the start. And you have, I did think the Lions would be better than they are. The offense certainly looked like it was going to help them to win a bunch more games this year. And they've just kind of their defense has really killed them. And the Bears are just the Bears. The Bears are terrible. But I really did think that the Lions would be better. I'm not surprised by the Packers falling off. And and the Vikings are good. So, but they're not great. And you've got Kirk Cousins. I just talked about Kirk Cousins. Again, you can win with him, but he's not a championship caliber quarterback. Like, he's not the guy. I'd be very, there's a reason he's never gone on a playoff run before. So you're right. It's a weak division, and the AFC South is a weak division. All the teams in the NFC East, the Giants, Cowboys, and Eagles are all going to win more than 10 games. And, in all their cases, maybe 11 or more.
Let's rank. Let's have some fun here. The 5 best teams in the NFL. Go.
Eagles, Vikings, Cowboys, Giants.
And so you're going to NFC first before we do the entire league.
Oh, you're talking about all of football. Okay.
Yeah, all football. Because there aren't that many good teams.
Yeah, no. All right, I'll say the Bills. I think the Bills are still the best team in the NFL. I think the Eagles are number 2. The Chiefs are number 3. I think I've got the Vikings at 4.
Okay.
And I think I got to put the Cowboys at 5.
And then NFC. Who would be the NFC team?
I think the 5th best NFC team, I would probably still give it to the Bucs. I think they have the fewest weaknesses out of the rest of those other teams. But, Tom Brady's got to get his off-field stuff together because it's affecting his on-field stuff.
The Bucs are such a weird team. They don't run the ball well. So Brady's got to carry them, and he's not doing that. And their defense, I don't know. Like, I love Todd Bowles, but some people are just meant to be coordinators. It feels like he's one of those guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're seeing a drop-off from Bruce Arians last year, but I really do think it's difficult to know what Bowles has to work with Tom Brady this year. And that team revolves around Tom Brady. I mean, Tom Brady's the head coach.
Yeah, he is.
With Todd Bowles there, Tom Brady's the head coach. And Tom Brady's too busy yelling at his offensive line and dealing with marital problems in the media. So I think you're right. Todd Bowles might just be a great defensive coordinator and not necessarily a great head coach. But when Tom Brady leaves, which this feels like his last year, I don't know what they do for quarterback. This is kind of their last hurrah. So, yeah, I think Tampa Bay is the 5th best team in the conference by default right now. And I do think there's a team from underneath, might be 2-4 right now that can go on a run. I don't know who that could be. I still think the Lions, if they can get their defense straightened out, have the offensive talent to go on a run. But, it's a wide open NFC. Anything can happen.
Before I let you go here, since you brought up Tom Brady, I'm always that guy that if I'm an offensive lineman and Tom Brady's yelling in my face on game day, publicly shaming me, I'm that guy who goes, hold on a second. Were you just at a wedding?
Yeah.
Like, we're grinding, we're studying film here, and you're doing whatever it is, your happy endings with Robert Kraft. So, like, what was your take on that whole thing?
No, he's a baby. He's a baby. He's selfish. I think we've kind of always known that. I think that's true of a lot of the great superstars in all sports. That's kind of how they are.
Aaron Rodgers
Yeah. So I mean, it was out of line. You don't do that. That's not how you treat other grown men, especially grown men who are paid to protect you. And it's galling because he doesn't have any self-awareness. He wasn't there all week, or he wasn't there the couple days before the game. He didn't participate in training camp at all because he's dealing with stuff at home. Like, dude, if you've got home stuff going on, just take care of it. Take a leave. But what he's doing is lashing out. And I think what he's got to do, and this is kind of galling that a 40-whatever-year-old man doesn't know this already, is, to take, be a grown-up about it. This is as much on you as it is on them. When you're not practicing together, it's difficult to play well. So, yeah, it was childish. It was babyish. And that's kind of been Tom Brady's MO his whole career.
Yeah, and now he's complaining about roughing the passer penalties off.
Yeah. Just go away. Go away.
It might be it after this year. I had that funny feeling when he took the 11-day hiatus or whatever he did with Giselle.
Yeah.
I'm just like, you know what? I think this is it. Probably shouldn't have come back this year. That's what happens when you try to defy Father Time as long as you can.
Yeah.
But once again, John, I appreciate you coming on. It's always a fun conversation talking to NFC East. And so do you got anything coming up for Bleeding Green Nation this weekend?
We're actually along with the Eagles, are going to take a bye week for Eye on the Enemy this week. So we're going to rest. As you can tell, the pipes are, and I, hate referring to my voice as the pipes because I don't have any really, but my voice is pretty well shredded. We're doing a lot of podcasts for the Good Fight podcast feed after every Phillies game. The Hitting Season podcasts are basically like coming every night right now. So that's, and we're going to downshift on Eye on the Enemy for a week, and we'll gear it back up next week for who the Eagles? The Eagles are playing next week. No, it's totally Pittsburgh. Thank you. Yeah, so we'll talk to somebody from the Steelers SB Nation site and preview that game next week.
Yes, sounds great, John. Well, hopefully next time you do Eye on the Enemy, you're still doing Hitting Season podcasts, and the Phillies are in the World Series. So yeah. Let's both hope there. John, absolutely. I appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Always a pleasure, Jeff. Thanks, man.